Deshpande Foundation, and the foundation is out of the vision of Desh and Jayashree Deshpande, and based on his experience, we are focused on encouraging entrepreneurship and innovation, and using that as a force for social and economic change. We have 4 centers around the world. Anu, in our introduction, mentioned a couple of them. We have one at MIT, and then the largest center, which is in India, works extensively in a region where we try to focus on social innovation. So it's how do we bring innovation to the bottom of the pyramid. But when you look at the numbers, and it's great to be over here to see the kind of work that Ekal is doing, because it is touching 1.5 million children. But when you look at the challenges out there, it's more than 1.5 million children. We're talking of 60 million children, I think, that we need to reach out there in the villages. And most of the challenges that we face out there in the world that are the big challenges require people to think about them right from the get-go in terms of scale, in terms of sustainability. And that's one of the messages that we take with us when we go out and work in India. So we emphasize right from the get-go the 3 S's. One is social innovation. So in the area that we work in, we call it the sandbox. It's about 10 million, consists of about 10 million people living in about 5 districts. And so we bring in ideas. We've brought in about 100 different ideas in the region. And we help give them some seed grants so they can try something innovative. And it's okay if you try something innovative and fail, because that's the point of innovation. You try out new ideas and you take risks. And we want to apply that same kind of for-profit model where, over here we look at angel investors and VCs where they seed a lot of different ideas, but not every idea that a VC funds succeeds. Maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 100. And we need to have that same spirit of innovation when you look at how do you solve these tough challenges at the bottom of the pyramid. But more important, when you think of innovation and you try out these ideas, right from the get-go, you should think in terms of scale and sustainability too. So for example, much like Ekal, one of the successes that we have helped support is also in the education space, is the midday lunch program, which a lot of people have heard of, Akshay Patra. And they feed about 1.4 million students across India right now. And the way they've done that is a combination of thinking about it both as a challenge that you need to solve at scale, and also bringing best practices to it. So not just approaching it from the donations and the grant giving side, where you want to raise enough money to attack that problem, but also thinking about it in terms of how do you solve it. And so they have brought in best practices from business, best practices from technology, best practices from design. And what they've done is designed vertically integrated manufacturing hubs that can feed 100,000 to 150,000 students per day in 4 hours. So they are you start at 4 in the morning, and by 8 o'clock, you have 150,000 meals that are then distributed to 500 to 1,000 schools in the neighborhood through insulated trucks. But all of this happens with careful planning right from the get-go, because you know that you need to think of it in scale in order for something like that to happen. And now, their plan is to go to 5 million schools by 2020. So that's one example of how you can use scale to start thinking of it right from the get-go, as opposed to opening 1,000 soup kitchens, which might at some point not be able to reach a number of people, but would scale a lot less effectively and lot less efficiently. Another example in terms of sustainability is, trying to teach an old dog new tricks, right? I mean, there are, I think, over 1.5 million NGOs in India. And just like the US, and the US, I think there are about 1 billion NGOs. But the majority of the nonprofits and the NGOs are small entities that are just having local impact. And some of them have been around for a while. And so one of the other areas that we work in is agriculture. We work with a lot of the rural farms. And rural farms in India, most of them are subsistence farmers. They're 1 or 2 acres. And whatever they grow on that farm basically maintains their life for the rest of the year. And typically, in a typical farm, especially in the regions, some of the regions that that are not that blessed with ecological or climatological circumstances, it's a year-to-year kind of living. If you make it one year, the rains are right, you're okay. If the rains are not, you don't. And so we brought in an existing NGO that has been working in the north, where water is more plentiful, to help farms strengthen their local livelihood by introducing new crops and new plants. They were used to doing this in the north, where they'd come and work in a small farm, and it cost about 10,000 rupees to do it. So when they came to us, we tried to introduce their processes in some of the farms in our region. And so we helped, gave them a grant to get them started. And one of the things we kept pushing is, how do we take this thing and scale it and make it self-sustainable? So the first thing we did with them was try to see how we could come up with some returns on scale. And over a couple of years, reduce the cost of implementation from around 10,000 rupees to about 5,000 rupees per farm. So now you could do the farms a lot cheaper, but we were still funding them. At that point, we had already got 2 or 3 years worth of track record with the farms, and we were able to show a farmer, typically before they went and got engaged with this, would make maybe 10 to 12,000 rupees a year. That is, $200 a year as his output from the farm. After this intervention, which included a lot of techniques in rainwater retention, planting of more valuable products, trees and so on, their farmers' revenue would go up to 40 or 50,000 rupees a year, which is a 3 or 4-fold increase from where they were in the past. And when it comes to poverty, there's a basic line. When you look at farmers, when they're around 10 to 15, 20,000 rupees, that line, they're hovering over this line, and one bad year they're below the line, and they wind up either having to borrow, and in most cases they borrow from a loan shark, and then they're stuck forever. And if you can push them up over that line sufficiently, they're now at a safe zone, so that even when they have a bad year, they're not going to dip down to a point where they're going to have to go into debt. And so by pushing them up to this 45,000 rupees a year level, all of a sudden they're getting more self-sufficient, and they're also being able to save. So the next step we did was we said, look, we're going to, instead of giving 5,000 rupees for each farmer, why don't we ask the farmers to put in half that money? So the farmers put in half, 2,500, and now we put in 2,500, so now your fundraising goes a lot farther with that. Now that we've established and we have got the farmers thinking that way, the next logical step now is to say, okay, we know that once we do this intervention, now we've done it for over 1,000 farms, that there's almost a sure guarantee that 3 years from now you're going to be making 40,000 more rupees per year for the next few years. Why don't you kick into the investment? So the next phase is, you have the farmer put up the money. 3 years later, you have the farmer give back 5,000 or some amount for the next 2 or 3 years. All of a sudden, now this program becomes self-sustaining. It's no longer, you don't need to have an NGO in order to make something like that happen. So it's, it's changing the mentality of NGOs to start thinking a little more innovatively, to start thinking about how you can share the value between the beneficiary and the NGO. When you're providing value to the beneficiary and they really get something from it, how do you get to share that as you go downstream? You might need to invest up front in order to get the thing started, but after some point, there's a way to make that self-sustaining.
Thanks.